Hello there, how are you all doing? This chapter of the System for Dummies, I'm going to lay out today was going to be on something different. I was going to cover the 3 pillars of society and how they're subverted. But after a couple of comments that I got from one of my new subs, Jim Slake, I thought this might be a better topic, especially in light of current events that are going on in the Middle East. Pardon me. Now, what June pointed out was, she said, I don't think I've ever seen you talking about the Qataris ever. And their involvement with terrorist groups, funding terrorist groups and everything else, and funding all sorts of other people around the world that Israel are getting the blame for a lot of the time. People like Tucker Carlson, who I think it's no secret now that he's funded by the Qataris by his some of the things he said and some of the things he's done over the past few months. How this likely also links into people like Candace Owens and Ian Carroll and everyone else. Probably. I have actually talked about them a good few times, in a sort of backhanded sort of way. And a couple of my previous videos on the Qataris have also been taken down by YouTube a couple of times. So I'm not even sure whether this is going to stay up or not, right? But we'll forge ahead anyway. One of the things you have to understand about the current Middle East is that a lot of the wars that they have between each other are in fact familial spats. It very much resembles how what was going on in Europe during the Middle Ages, in fact, about to World War II, really. That it was the same family warring with each other, using us to settle their disputes in the forms of war. War against the Habsburgs is a prime example that that us Brits had. It spanned about 150, 200 years and spawned 7 consecutive wars from around the mid-1500s up until the early 1700s. That ending with the Austrian War of Accession, or the 7 Years' War, it's also called, for some reason, because it lasted 14 years. I don't know why it's called 7 Years' War, but anyway, it's beside the point. All of the Middle East sort of royal families, the Middle Eastern royal families, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, Yemenis, Saudis, Jordanians, blah, 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 blah. All of them are related to each other. They're all branches of the same family. And like I said, the Qataris are no different. All of them are Sassoons, essentially. They're all branches of the Sassoon family. As I mentioned before, the Sassoons aren't Jewish. Even though they're rabbis, yes. The 2 patriarchs at the moment. They aren't Jewish. They're Arabic. They just kind of pose as Jews, I suppose you could say. Stem from the Edomite tribes, as I said before. All of them do. All of them. The Saudis, Bahrainis, every single one of them, all of them. All of them stem from the same bloodline, the same family. Now, the Qataris have a kind of cosy position. Their land is rich in minerals, one of which is oil, which is one of the main things they made the money from. But they've also got quite a lot of rare minerals, like the Saudis do in Saudi Arabia, and the Yemenis do. This has made them, because of the deals that they've done with the US, extremely wealthy. They're also under the protection of the US, and Qatar hosts the largest US military base in the whole of the Middle East. So to say they're good friends with the US government as a whole, it's pretty accurate. It is a kind of tenuous relationship though, because in some circles they're not very popular. And they have a deep sort of, supposed deep sort of mistrust with Israel. This is one of the biggest lies ever. Yeah, their antagonism towards the Israelis. Just like all of the Middle East, none of them have an antagonism towards Israel. We all know the score. What it's there for. Why it was created in the first place. Was to cause chaos in the whole area. It was to keep oil production and the oil price at a similar level across the board that would be beneficial to the US, but also beneficial to the actual royal families that run those countries. The falling outs that they have, though, between each other are real. Their wars, their spats, shall we say. The latest, at the moment, is between the Yemenis and the Saudis. Again, both branches of the same family. But with the Yemenis, it was stable for a while. After it split, after the first civil war, that was started by the Americans. Likewise, the second civil war, that was started by the Americans. You'll notice this be a recurring theme, by the way. All these wars seem to start because of some sort of US interest. You see, all of that Middle East region, right, along with Israel, is very new. Yeah? It only really kicked off there in the late 1940s, as Israel was being formed. So too were Iran, Iraq, Syria, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, Yemen, Egypt. The current nation of Egypt is even younger. It was the Arabic Republic of Egypt for a very long time until not Sisi, he's the current one. I think it was about 1960. No, in fact, it was just after the 7 Days War with Israel, when Egypt fell and regime was changed and the country was changed further after that. Again, American funded, American help. So all of these countries, like I said, have been pretty new. And all of these rulers were basically installed, all these royal families were installed by us Brits and the US to basically preside over these nations. We just gave them a blind eye, over what they do. They just give us cheap oil, cheap minerals. And they do the occasional favour. With Qatar, because they've got such a good relationship with a great many of the terrorist organisations in the Middle East, mostly through religion, just gives them sort of, because they're special privilege in the eyes of many of these people that join those organisations, that they're perfect to act as a go-between. All of these terrorist organisations were set up by us, by the US and UK intel. People try and paint it onto Mossad. It wasn't Mossad. We used the help of the Israelis, in some cases, but Hamas being one example. But in most part, we did it ourselves. Usually because the regime at the time was going against our interests. Like in the case of Lebanon, where they decided they didn't want to be involved with the US anymore. And so we said, fine, you can do that. Oh look, what's this over here? Seems to be a load of rebels that want to destroy your nation. Those rebels being Hezbollah. It didn't take them very long to come to our way of thinking, shall we say, and re-establish the ties with the US that their regime has, and the rest of the Arab world, and we essentially installed Hezbollah into the south of their country as a reminder, shall we say, that you'll do as you're told. We did the same in Yemen. I find it utterly absurd how people don't really ask questions when they're told someone's a rebel faction. Because who's the rebels rebelling against? Who are they rebelling against? Why is it that the actual faction itself only arose 20 years after the actual guy that they named after died? And the country was quite stable until suddenly there was oil that was discovered in that part, which wasn't controlled by the US. And now all of a sudden, everyone's kicking off. Well, look, yeah. Why is it that the Qataris can get away with doing everything that they're doing, funding all the organisations that they are, without so much as a sniff from the West. Because they're doing the bidding of the West, of course. Nothing to do with Israel. We have complete dominance over that region. It's that simple. How many Israeli bases are there around the Middle East? How many US and UK bases are there around the Middle East? Quite a high number, yeah? Places like Israel serve a few purposes. As with everything, like I said, with the system, everything is multifaceted, yeah? Multi-agendas, multi-objectives. When you are developing weapons, one of the most vital pieces of weapons research is field tests. How do we operate in the field? How well do they? How effective are they? Yeah? How easy are they to use? The people untrained on them. Yeah? How quickly can you train people on them? Is there any other purpose that it could be used for? You know, all that sort of stuff. One of the best testing grounds for a new weapon is, of course, a small war somewhere. If your economy is based solely around war and weaponry, yeah, which is what the US is basically, it's the main crux of their manufacturing is weapons, right? I know people don't like to hear that, right? But what about Google? They make loads of money. Yada 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 yada. Yeah, they do. But it's weapons manufacturing, weapons sales that drives their economy, because they use that in exchange for oil, in exchange for other things. You scratch our back, we'll give you protection. So these weapons need to be top dollar, top notch, need to be tested to the nth degree. And like I said, the best place to test them out is a war zone. If you can engineer a permanent state of war and battlefield somewhere around the world, you have a continuous testing ground for your weaponry, especially if you get one of the sides to be allied with you. Israel has never been in control. This is one of the reasons why the US is so dominant. It does offer the Israelis a bargaining chip, shall we say, that they can use. But in most part, it's the Israelis that capitulate to the US. And everyone doesn't really concentrate on this part, right? Which happens more often than you think. Unless you listen to the anti-Israel mob, who only concentrate on the times when Israel actually does have the upper hand, right? And it's not very often. It's not as often as you think. Most of the time, it's the US and UK that have dominance over the Israelis all the time during any sort of negotiations. That's why when Trump turned around and said, "Hey, Netanyahu, stop that," he did. Now, the Qataris play a massive role in funding these organisations that feed the terrorism and feed the terrorist organisations in that area. They feed them with cash, yeah? Supposedly from their own coffers, but it's not. It's CIA, MI6 money. It's from the DIC, from the Deception Industrial Complex. The Qataris don't use their own money. They just give the appearance of using their own money. It's the same with... It's a less obvious, less overt means of funneling cash into all those organisations within that area. We also get the Iranians to do it, yeah. The Israelis do it as well for us. And we funnel it there as well in the forms of aid to these nations, yeah. Nobody asks, why are we funding lesbian prayer meetings in Yemen to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars? Why we're setting up schools for girls in Afghanistan, yeah? Or giving money for schools for girls in Afghanistan when the Taliban are in control and don't allow girls to have schools, yeah? Or an education. Why are all the bullshit excuses for why we're handing this money over aren't questioned in any way, shape or form? It boggles the mind, it really does. It is glaringly obvious who holds the keys to the world when you look at the Middle East situation in general, yeah? Why it's obvious through, like I said, their funding, where the funding goes, how it gets there, where it comes from. Why there's massive amounts of funding from the US, loads of money being transferred into the Middle East just before something major kicks off. A prime example, October 7th. Yeah? The Israelis were told to turn the border, their electronic border off. They were told to. Likely by, like I said, the DIC, the US and UK Intel. Because they needed to ramp things up further a bit. Got some good stuff they needed to test. We paid huge amounts of money for those contracts. So needed somewhere to test it, which is why Palantir are in the area testing out all their AI systems. Likewise, Bell Labs and Raytheon, BAE Systems in the UK, yeah? The Golden Dome, they haven't had really sort of they weren't even sure it was going to work, right? When they supposedly sold it to the Israelis. So what better way to get that tested than to start a new beef with their age-old adversary, the Iranians. That's an interesting situation that's going on in that area at the moment. Currently, we're 5 days into what looks to be an uprising by the Iranian people. What looks to be a very organic uprising at that. Of course, you have the usual retards on Twitter and everywhere else stating that it's Israel that started it off, blah, 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 look what the Israelis are doing. Well, excuse me, well, if it is the Israelis, why is this a bad thing? The Iranian people have been under a brutal regime for God knows how long, right? Again, by another branch of the Sassoon family, the Ayatollah, yeah? At the moment, their economy is literally fucked, yeah? I think $1 in Iranian reals now, I think it's something like 150, 200,000 reals to $1. They've got basically Zimbabwe levels of inflation there. Their infrastructure is completely collapsed. Barely anyone's getting any water, power. And yet the Iranian regime is spending all their money still on weapons to fight the Israelis. It's just no surprise that people have had enough. But people want to blame this on Israel, the uprising. We've forgotten to rise up against a regime like the Iranian regime. Again, why is this a bad thing? Because you want to install Parliament. Yeah, the Iranian people want him. If he wants to protest, they're demanding he come home. All of them. Every single protest in every single city are all demanding that the Crown Prince come home to help them, sort them out. To take over the regime, they want him to rule. Pahlavi doesn't want to rule. He's already said that himself. He said he'll assist in finding them a ruler, a president, a democratically elected ruler, but he doesn't want to rule over them. He just wants to be an advisor, actually an advisor like capacity. But of course, all the Israel tards are turning around and going, he's an Israeli asset. Seriously, are you people that myopic? That full of hate that everything that happens in the world is Israel's fault? Do you know how retarded that is? The Iranians rise up against their regime, it's Israel's fault. What? So? Trump farts, it's Israel's fault. You have a pimple on your bum, it's Israel's fault. Shut the fuck up. You people have no idea how the fucking world works, you really don't. If Israel's in control of the West, right? Here's a good example. If Israel is in control of the West, why is it, right? The UK's intel community has a permanent office in every single agency within their intel community in the US, right? With their HQs. And likewise, vice versa. The Americans have the same in British HQs. At the moment, they're kicking off because Keir Starmer's gone a bit fucking rogue. Again, he's not controlled by Israel. Why are the Qataris allowed to build a military base on US soil? They're the only nation that's allowed to do that. They're allowed to build a military base on US soil. Where's the Israeli one? If Israel and Qatar are so vehemently opposed to each other, why are they allowing the Qataris to do it? That entire situation in the Middle East, the whole thing is engineered and controlled by US and UK intel. The Qataris are just another wing of that. Remember, they're all Sassoons. Now, you could argue that the Sassoons run Israel, so therefore Israel. But they're not the tip of the spear either. And we know this. People need to start thinking, I'm actually filled with a bit of hope because some of the more vehement anti-Israel voices after Charlie Kirk died and everyone was blaming Israel were turning around going, hang on a minute, yeah, Israel's evil, but this is a bad move for them. Because it is. And if they can see it, they're the honest ones. At least they believe what they're saying, right? And want to find the truth. Unlike people like Ian Carroll, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, who are blaming Israel just because it makes money. And all the gonads, the people with an IQ less than a squirrel, banging on about Israel, 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 Jews, Jews, Jews. Lap it up and pay them loads of money, earn them loads of money, because it's the thickest pig shit, driven by emotion, which is the problem with a lot of these anti-Israel guys. But even they put their emotions to one side for a minute and went, no, it's not them. It doesn't make sense. You can tell, right, when it's a government or an agency that assassinates somebody, because they're very clockwork, very meticulous, very designed, not haphazard. They take years of planning because they have to have everything laid out perfectly so nothing leads back to them, right? And they follow a very set playbook. I uploaded a presentation that Colonel Fletcher Prouty did in 1978 on the anatomy of assassination. Yeah? He did this at a UN conference, I think, or a Security Council conference in the US, just before Reagan got in. And he breaks down how the CIA conducts assassinations. They have a whole department, Operation Mongoose. Look it up. It was set up to basically take out Castro. Now, of course, they didn't do a very good job of it because he managed to live every time. But what they took from those attempts and the planning stages and everything else and the contacts that they made, they then used everywhere else around the world and managed to take out a great many people. The US and UK intel machine that, like I said, I like to call the deception industrial complex, because that's what it is the driving force behind every regime change, every war, every terrorist attack, every terrorist organisation. They may use other proxies here and there in certain areas so they don't have to get their hands dirty. One prime example, again, is Mossad. We essentially set up everybody's intel agency. Yeah? Even the Russians copied our model, yeah, for the KGB. Right? They copied our model because we have the second oldest. The first oldest is the Jesuits, right? And the British military intelligence was founded a little after that. It actually started with John Dee in the late 1500s. As he was travelling Europe. The number for James Bond and the name James Bond, 007, comes from John Dee's letters to Queen Elizabeth I as he was travelling Europe, infiltrating all these elite circles and royal houses across the European continent, sending intel back. Signed, your friend, James Bond 007. You can see them in the British Museum. Anyway, British National Library. Well, British National Library. Anyway, I'm going off topic. So yeah, everyone copies our model. Or we essentially help set them up and integrate them into our intel infrastructure. Always happens. We did the same with the Israelis. Yeah. This all started with Gladio. I mentioned that before as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch my Gladio series, and you'll start making more sense. Or go on Twitter and start talking to Colonel Towner. Yeah? She's a very nice lady. American Air Force colonel, retired Air Force colonel, who's been banging on about this, Gladio, and the way it operates for at least 3 years on there. It's a good lad, good girl. We still need to sort of try and arrange some way of actually getting us to have a chat, but beside the point. So inside that Middle East sphere, we'll go back to the Middle East. Inside that Middle East sphere, the Qataris are essential because they have contact with all of the terrorist organisations in that area. What you will call the terrorist organisations, so the Houthis, the Hamas, Hezbollah, Shining Path. No. So yeah, Shining Path in Egypt, and Muslim Brotherhood are another proxy of ours that are also heavily funded by the Qataris and therefore us. In much the same way during Gladio that we used the Vatican to funnel information and funnel funding to all these different sort of organisations along with the mafia to traffic the weapons and smuggle people in and out. The Qataris are used in much the same way because they are largely Shia Muslim, supposedly. I think in the eyes of the Middle Eastern royals, the Sunni and Shia is pretty interchangeable. Likewise, Wahhabi as well, which is what the side of the royal family are, Wahhabis. If you don't know what Wahhabis are, or what they're Salafist, kind of Salafist sort of ish, Salafist light, I think you could say. The Taliban's a prime example. They're a bit more extreme in the Wahhabi ideology than the Salafists are. Who are they're an Islamic version of the Amish, just without the peacefulness and more anger and likely eternal regret for becoming Salafist and not liking technology, music, fun, people themselves. At least the Amish build things, I suppose. The Salafists don't. This Western intel influence throughout the Middle East is no more exemplified than with Syria. People try and claim that ISIS was an Israeli invention because they had a hand in it. The reason why Israelis are used, the reason why Mossad is used, right, is because Israelis, particularly Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews, look like Arabs, and Arabs look like Mizrahi and Sephardic Jews, because they all are the same fucking race at the end of the day. They're all part of that Arabic bloodline in some way, shape or form. That Arabic lineage. It's just that the Jews chose a different path than the Muslims did. The Muslims were Zoroastrian, which influenced the Torah in some ways, others not. Greeks influenced it more. Well, but anyway, it's beside the point, getting off topic again. But they look like each other. It's why the Romans just didn't see any difference between them and just bungled them all together. Why the Edomites, like I said, Arabs, were put into the Jewish temple, even though they weren't Jewish. They didn't follow Judaism. But they put them in as the priest class. The Sadducees and Pharisees. In the Jewish temple. It's one of the things Jesus was kicking off for, because they weren't Jews, which is what he said. When Jesus talks about the synagogue of Satan and the Jews that claim they're Jews but are not Jews, he's not talking about Ashkenazi Jews or anything like that, or Middle Eastern Jews. He's specifically talking about the Edomites, because they were inserted as Jews when they weren't Jews, yeah? And played along with it because they got a lot of power at the end of the day. King Herod, king of Jerusalem, was Edomite, was Arabic. So was his entire bloodline after that, which is where, coincidentally, the Sassoons stem from. But you people want to keep on blaming the Israelis, keep blaming the Jews for something it's not even their fault. Yeah? Again, off topic. Well, no, it's not actually. It's pretty much on topic. Right. So with Syria, yeah, we use Mossad to get across the border, right? Again, because they look Arabic, we don't, right? Big clue here. We use them to go and start helping our guys, which is E Squadron, Red Cell, yeah, who were on the ground about 6 months before anything kicked off, right, in Syria, to go and start infiltrating all these tribes that were getting pissed off with Assad, yeah, because he wasn't Islamic enough. Drumming up support, and then continuing that support, and continuing arming them, and continuing funding them all the way through, yeah. When we were forced into helping the Russians and the Iranians bomb the hell out of the rebels to keep Assad in power, right? We were bombing our own people, which is why we kept on announcing what we were going to do, much to the chagrin of the Iranians and the Russians. We kept announcing what we were going to do a couple of days beforehand to ensure that all of our people got out of that area first, and then bomb the hell out of empty buildings. Al-Jalani, or whatever it's called, was part of that sort of operation. ISIS was just Al-Qaeda mercenaries. That's all they were, yeah? Just helping rebel factions here and there. Quite sort of undertrained, underfunded, and under a massive delusion sort of rebel factions that were basically just farmers and homeless people a lot of the time. Or Kurds in the north. PKK are a different sort of kettle of fish. But this again all stemmed from an organisation, well, supposed organisation that began in Iraq, yeah? An insurgent force for us to fight against, to help our continued presence there, right? To keep us in that area, to keep that war going, because it generates lots of money. So we kind of started them in Libya first, but then it just became apparent that we could just have a normal rebel faction there, and we moved them across into Iraq. Al-Baghdadi was a fictional entity. I've said this plenty of times, lots and lots and lots of times. He never existed in the first place. He was just a bogeyman for the actual control grid at the top, which was our MI6 and CIA-led special ops units. Yeah? E Squadron in the UK that come out of the SAS, yeah, a branch of the SAS, that are under the command and jurisdiction of the Intel, yeah, of Intel, of DI, of UK DI, which is Defence Intelligence, and MI6. And then you had, out of the Special Activities Division, or Special Activities Unit, or Centre, depending on which way you want to put it, you had Red Cell, which is their version of our E Squadron. And as I've said before, countless times as well, these are specially trained operators that are trained to think and act like terrorists. Yeah, so you could drop them into an area, and you could just like a real life version, military version of MacGyver. Yeah, they will use whatever they can to do their objective, and whoever they can, and they will begin that through any means necessary. Often it's just psychological propaganda war, yeah, that they do, and intel gathering quite a lot because they're behind enemy lines. But their main mandate is false flags. Yeah, that's what they're trained, specially trained to do. Is instigate false flag operations, usually in opposing nations' regimes, against opposing nations' regimes, but they do it in our own nations as well. We've had them turn against us quite a lot. Again, people don't realise this because they're too fixated on Israel and the Israel narrative, which is, like I said, psyop. Always has been. You can tell it's a psyop by the high level of emotion and the low regard for any information to the contrary of the people that are pushing the narrative and also under the spell of the narrative. You can tell it's a psychological operation because they've been indoctrinated. They've been fed a compelling web or weave of bullshit mixed with fact. Yeah? Like I said last time, written by fiction writers. I was having an argument with someone the other day. They were talking about Arthur Koestler. And Koestler is a very, very good example of this, actually. And I can't believe I missed that last time. The UK has a department within our intel called the Information Research Department, right? Often nicknamed the Dirty Tricks Brigade. Their job is solely to create propaganda. It was at one time called MI7. Yeah, the military intelligence or MI department in the UK. They numbered about 10, and now it's 3. No, it's 2. In fact, 2. There's only MI5 and MI6, and then you have UK Defence Intelligence that encompasses everything else. It's a lot more slimline than many others, such as the Americans who have several all over the place. So the Dirty Tricks Department, their main goal is to create propaganda, but not just for the people to get people on our side. Right? Whenever you want to destabilise a nation, you need to radicalise both factions on either side. Right? The faction you want to win, but also the faction you're going against. So you need propaganda that will radicalise them, your enemy, and also propaganda that will radicalise your ally in that area. Most people can't understand this. Yeah? Why? This is what he said, right? This guy said, why would Koestler write propaganda for fighting communists that was pro-communist? For the exact reason I just said. Yeah? If you want the entire revolution or uprising to look, or fall of the regime to look natural and not like you've played a hand, you need both factions to be wound up enough to actually fight each other. And for that, you use a lot of propaganda. You have to psychologically manipulate people into doing that. This is why you see a lot of anti-Jewish information out there, right? Even though it's suppressed, if it was that suppressed, you won't be able to find it. Yeah? And you won't be able to talk about it now. Yeah? Israel won't be the topic du jour these days if they were in control and you couldn't criticise them. Which means something else is in play. But again, something these mental fucking retards can't understand. That they're being played in a massive way. They serve the purpose. Likewise, the Iranians have served the purpose. Yeah? Which is why they're leaving them alone. And they're going to let Paliva go and like, essentially take back over. Shah's son. Probably done a better deal with them. Yeah, fair enough. It's not Israel that does this. Israel wouldn't propagandize against itself. Now, yeah, you have a lot of CEOs that are Israeli, well, Jewish. Some of them very pro-Israel. Some of them not so pro-Israel. All of them are employees. Again, you people don't understand this. You don't understand the difference between a CEO and an owner. Once you become a CEO, you're no longer an owner. You can't be an owner and a CEO. Because the CEO is an employee. So that company doesn't belong to them. Yeah? Get that in your head. Doesn't belong to them. If it did, they wouldn't be CEO. They'd be the owner, and they'd state they're the owner. Yeah. Even on boards, yeah, on the board of directors for these companies, they'd still be classed as the owner, which means they're not. They're an employee, so they're no longer the owner. Why are they no longer the owner? I've already mentioned this before with the pie shares quite a lot of time, right? Everything to do with the business world of finance is completely fabricated and bullshit at the end of the day. As I've said before, everybody is a trustee of the pie share family and their affiliates, which are the families at the top. Which means you don't own anything. When you turn around and said you own nothing and be happy, I was laughing my ass off. You're already in that state already. It's making it official, public. That's why you don't own the land under your house, even though you built a house there maybe. You never own the land. That deed, that title deed, is just for the bricks and mortar that are above it. But even that is now on top of that land, so it's owned by people who own the deed, which is the crown. Which crown there? Many people turn around and say it's the British crown. No, it's not. No, it's not. The British lost every single right that they had. Yeah? Their right to rule and the right to wear that crown when they allowed the Rothschilds to marry into the family. As soon as they did that, it put a taint on their bloodline. Big no-no. Which is why, most of the time, they're snubbed by the true elite in Europe. The true royal elite. And this is the Scandinavians mainly. But also the Italians. They rule the roost. Always have. None of them are Jewish. Some of them may be Persian, like the assassins. The Brandini. The rest of them are Italian, descended from Constantine and Justinian, like I said, out of the black nobility. And then you have the European royals that are descended from Charlemagne, which are all your Scandinavians and Grovers in England. The Pisces, France, that are a branch of the Bourbon family. And now you're starting to see the Bourbons coming out of the woodwork over the past 10 years, making themselves very public. Why are they doing that? And they just so very handily tell you everything about their bloodline in their dynastic history. They're on the website. It's fantastic. It's two extremely significant figures in the whole of French sort of royal history. One of them is Charlemagne, the other is Louis XIV. It was called the Sun King. They've always been seen as divine. The divine family, the divine bloodline. Not Jesus, yeah? Not the line of David, which is what many people try and stem it to. Not Nimrod, right? The people that think it's Nimrod are Nimrods. Thick as fuck. It's all European royal lines, royal bloodlines. The age of your blood and the blood running through your veins and the ancestry that you have are magnitudes above any wealth you can have, even though they have 1,500 years of wealth behind them, yeah, at least. So to say people like the Rothschilds coming in, they rule the world because of the wealth, you're a fucking moron. They're not the richest people in the world. Neither is Musk. Well, I was going to say neither is Musk. We'll get onto Elon Musk some other time. He's not who he says he is either. So that blood running through their veins is what gives them their divine right to rule. Yeah? The papal princes have their imperial lineage behind them, their Roman imperial lineage, plus their papal lineage that gives them the divine right to be the mouth of God, right? And their right, and God's right hand. It also extends to the divine family, the divine lineage, because they're divinity on it, they're God's chosen on it. They are God's chosen people. not Israel, not the Jews. The Jews just carried a tale as old as time within their Torah texts that are actually mirrored in thousands of other texts worldwide, globally, that talk of a time before time when things went to shit. And this is because of what the northern tribes did in Hyperborea, which I mentioned before. And they spread out into Doggerland, continued it there, continued more legends. This is why the Exodus story is so disjointed in the Old Testament, because it's actually talking about several different sort of Moses-like figures that led people from their land that was being destroyed to a new land, a promised land. Yeah. So from Hyperborea, they moved across Northern Europe, yeah, to Doggerland, which is now the English Channel. From Doggerland, when that filled up, they moved back across Europe to Arata, which is now the Black Sea. From there, they then moved down into Samaria and spread out into all of Asia across that way as well. And these elite bloodlines have all been the same elite bloodlines doing the same things and the same practices, whether they're doing it knowingly or not, every single time. The reason why we're in Ukraine at the moment is because of what was found in Crimea in 1999 by a guy called Dr. Vitaly Go, when he was testing out his geophysics technology and discovered something huge. And then major discoveries were found all over the place, or were supposedly found. The Russians already knew about them. The Donbass region, there's a reason why they're fighting over that area, because that's where the Iratans were. That's where the Iraqi capital was. Iraq actually spread out all the way around the Black Sea. So every single nation has some sort of Iraqi sort of ruins in there, yeah, because their empire was just surrounded the Black Sea basin. One of their most incredible discoveries that they found over the past few years is in Georgia, inside a mountain, which I believe is a gravity pump that they made to fill the Black Sea. They'll find more in those mountains all the way across the Caucasus Mountains, leading one way towards the Black Sea, leading the other towards the Caspian, across that land bridge between Georgia and Kabardino-Balkaria. Kalahora, it's called. They were mining lapis lazuli in the Black Sea. Lapis lazuli is extremely pure quartz. Quartz is extremely useful in so many different ways: energy, data storage, computing, you name it. There's hundreds of thousands of different uses for it. And lapis lazuli, although very attractive, is unbelievably valuable because of its purity. We know that people go on about, well, there's no lapis lazuli there. Like, yeah, but the cores that they've drilled show one, a very sudden and catastrophic flooding coming from the area of where the Georgian coast, as well as fine grains of lapis lazuli in the actual seabed, right? And the way it's pummeled, yeah, and the fineness of the grain can only be achieved through mining, strip mining to be exact. You look at the way the Black Sea is levelled, yeah, it looks like a strip mine, just on a massive scale, yeah. And that's what they were doing. They were strip mining lapis lazuli. Lake Baikal is another example, yeah. Well, I've still got a lot of it there, but when you look at Lake Baikal, that's the same thing. Huge mining operation. They're finding ruins off the coast that lead off where the original coastline was about 8,000 years ago before it was filled. The Black Sea is completely dead. There's nothing there. We don't know why, but when you actually when you actually take into account the actual processes of strip mining, blah 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 blah, plus the fact that it's very young. At the end of the day, it's a very young sea. It kind of becomes apparent why. Yeah, life's not had a chance to sort of evolve there. The life that was there, it was a freshwater sort of lake at one time, and then it filled up, highly salinated. The chemicals that are in it are completely alien to any sort of ocean there is around the world. But when you factor in again mining, it becomes a lot more sort of a lot more clear. And then you get all the way across, that sort of land bridge between the Caspian and the Black Sea, like in a line across there, like sort of parallel to the Caucasus mountain range. You get these huge round lakes that are endlessly deep. You don't know how deep to go. All completely dead yet again. No one knows why. But the water content and the way it's chemical, the chemicals that are in it match those of the Black Sea. So we know that the Black Sea's funnel into it somewhere. I could go into this for hours, right? Of why the Black Sea is so important and why everything that we're finding out now is exposing the system more and more and more. Daily I'm finding news stories, newspaper reports of some new discovery somewhere that backs up everything I've been saying. And no, it's not confirmation bias. You can go read them yourself. Yeah. Why is it not confirmation bias? Because I've left you every single bit of information I've used to research all of this in every single video. Every single video. My Gladio and my media Mindspace and Manipulation series alone, right, has over 1,000 documents, yeah, that I use to research that whole series, both of those series. And I've set up a group on Telegram just for those documents so you can find them all. So no, it's not confirmation bias. I resent the fact that people try and pin that on me without actually looking at the research that I've done. Maybe you've learned something. So, with that in mind, I've begun to see the operators that are out there, right? Yes, Qatari money is probably more involved in US politics than anyone actually will care to admit. The rise of Islam and the spread of Islam is because that's going to be what we're going to be under the control of. That's what they're going to use, because the Islamic theocratic ruling system, yeah, works exponentially well for controlling people. Yeah, they use the religion to control the masses to do what they want, basically. Yeah, to do what the actual upper elite do. They don't follow the same rules. Obviously, it's essentially Islamo-communism. That's what it is. The elite at the top take over all the money, all the power, everything else, and they crush everyone else below them, using religion as the bludgeoning tool. Yeah? And they'll sentence you to death for sneezing in an un-Islamic way, really. And that's the world we want for the West, because the West is too hard to keep a handle on, which is why they're trying to suppress free speech at the moment, because free speech dictates the more free you are to speak, the more free you are to think, yeah, to actually think, to think freely of whatever you want. So even though I give all these fucking Israel derangement syndrome guys a hard time, I'm not going to stop them from expressing their views. I'm not even going to tell you to stop listening to them, right? Because some of them are excellent researchers. They're just a bit misguided. Brian Dawson being a prime example. I like the guy. Yeah, he's the only one I recommend to anyone. When people ask who should have watched them, if I shouldn't watch these and these, well, Brian Dawson is one of them. Yes, he has a very sort of myopic sort of view of Israel, but his Epstein research is fucking unbelievable. Yeah, and his research into the Clintons, he just fixates too much on Israel, and that guides his not just his worldview, but the way he directs his research, which in some ways it's good, because it does give you an idea of where some of the money's coming from, but it doesn't give you a complete idea of what's actually going on, especially with that Epstein situation. All of that, the stuff that's missing from the Epstein files is in London, yeah? It's in an MI6 safe house somewhere, it is. Because he was a protege of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell wasn't just an Israeli agent, a Mossad agent. First of all, he was MI6. Then he was sent to Israel to become a Mossad agent, to keep tabs on Mossad. Yeah, people don't actually realise this. Yeah, wasn't the other way around. Wasn't Mossad then MI6? No. It was MI6 then Mossad. He was sent to the CIA to do exactly the same there, to infiltrate and feed information back to us, because again, trust issues. We've always had trust issues. And then he was approached by the KGB, which was the icing on the cake for us. The Israelis killed him. Yeah, they did. They killed him. Because they realised what he was doing. He wasn't killed for Russia. Killed for us. For what he was giving us. That doesn't take away the fact that he was a complete arsehole, though, as well, at the same time. It was like he shagged his daughter. Poor bitch, but then she made a complete twat of herself after, didn't she? Anyway. So Epstein wasn't the first. He wasn't the biggest either. He was just another one, yeah, of those procurators. Jimmy Savile was another. But us in the UK have been doing this for God knows how long. Yeah, look at Kincora care home in Northern Ireland during the 80s. You'll see a similar sort of thing. Yeah, it was our brainchild. We used that a lot. even our mobsters did it. Yeah, the Krays. Look at what the Krays did. How the Krays got influence over the UK's politicians and were then employed by the intel agencies because they were fucking good at what they did. Yeah, those guys were wankers, they really were. But again, it's not an Israeli invention. Just like concentration camps weren't Germans' inventions. No, we invented them from an idea we took from the Romans, from the Roman Empire, and we used them against the Boers in the Boer War. Everyone discounts the British because of our idiot fucking government, right? But it's not the government that are in control. Hasn't been for fucking decades, yeah? Just like the US, we're controlled by our intel agencies. Behind the scenes, in the bureaucracy. We have intel agents in our parliament posing as MPs. You have the same in the US, in the Senate and Congress. And the same is in the Middle East with the rulers. This has been more of a side notes thing, I think, for the System for Dummies. But hopefully it's given you a bit more of an insight of what the fuck is going on. I hope to God that the Iranians kick that fucking regime out. One, because I'm going to love seeing what the fucking Israeli tides end up turning around and saying after that. Oh no, they kicked the regime out. Oh, it's Israel doing it. Why is that a bad thing? And on the other, it'll free them. And it'll give the system a good kick up the arse, which is what it needs. Because at the moment, it thinks it's got everything sort of tied up in a nice, neat little bow, and this is giving them a kick in the knackers. Brilliant. Anyway, like, share, subscribe. No joke. See you later.